For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I seek recognition to speak on this important issue.
Gentleman opposed?
I am opposed.
Gentleman is recognized for 10 minutes.
And I'm opposed for a simple reason. This document filed by Mr. Mulvaney is not the President's budget. And it's being portrayed as it was a very misleading presentation of the President's budget. This is the President's budget. If you look at all the other budgets presented today, you'll find numbers and you'll find policy statements that describe the policies behind the budget. The thing Mr. Mulvaney filed, no policy. In fact, he just said the President's policy raises gas taxes, I believe. That's just a false statement. The other issue is why you have a number for revenue in the President's budget. You mentioned that there's a revenue number. The President's never pretended otherwise. The President's budget takes a balanced approach to deficit reduction. It makes cuts and it raises revenue. Let's talk about how he raises revenue. He raises revenue in part by getting rid of subsidies on the big oil companies. We think at a time of record profits, we don't need to have taxpayer subsidies for big oil companies. Our Republican colleagues, almost every one of them, have signed this pledge to Grover Norquist saying they won't get rid of one oil subsidy or one tax loophole for the purpose of deficit reduction. Well, the President thinks we need a balanced approach to deficit reduction. Now, you wouldn't know from reading Mr. Mulvaney's document, what he puts in place as the President's budget, that that's how the President raises revenue. You wouldn't know from Mr. Mulvaney's document that the President also asks the very top 2% of taxpayers to go back to paying the same top rate they were during the Clinton administration, a time when the economy was booming, because the President thinks we need to take a balanced approach. Again, a combination of revenues and spending cuts, because the President believes, and I agree, that if you do it the way the Republicans do it, without asking the folks at the very top to share some responsibility, it means you deal with the budget at the expense of everybody else. The expense of seniors, the expense of middle-income Americans, at the expense of important investments in our economy, like investments in transportation. Their budget cuts transportation next year by 46%, at a time we have 17% unemployment in the construction industry. Their budget puts the brakes on the budding economic growth. So, Mr. Chairman, let's end this charade. The gentleman said he wanted to get beyond politics. This is politics at its absolute worst, presenting something as the President's budget without the policy detail, without the explanation to the American people about what's in the President's budget. And as a result, he presents a very misleading version of what the President has asked us to do. In fact, the Democratic alternative that we will propose later adopts the general framework of the President's budget. We don't adopt every single proposal he makes in here, but we take the general framework. The difference is we have those policy statements. We make it clear that we want to get rid of the subsidies for the big oil companies, time they're making record profits. We make it clear that we want millionaires, people making $1 million a year, to go back to paying what they were during the Clinton administration. We make that clear in our alternative. And so let's not play this political charade. We're going to have the Democratic alternative that, as I said, takes the framework of the President's proposal. Our Republican colleagues will have an opportunity to vote against that. But this is not the President's budget. Let's not pretend it is. And I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from South Carolina.